Welcome to the Bookman's Corner. I'm Lois Lindstrom. We have a very exciting show for you today, ripped from today's national headlines. Our guest author is Ronald Kessler, who was named Washingtonian of the Year by Washingtonian Magazine and who has written 7 national bestsellers, including First Family Detail, The Secrets of the FBI, and The CIA at War. So nice to have you here, Ronald.
Thank you for having me.
In your latest book, The Trump White House, Changing the Rules of the Game, you write that never before has an American president had so much impact on the country and the world in so short a time as Donald Trump. And no president has stirred so much controversy, dominating media coverage and conversation, both pro and con. Months after Trump took office, consumer confidence hit a 17-year high, unemployment plummeted to the lowest level in 17 years, and the stock market zoomed to repeated record highs. Our guest author, Ronald Kessler, has known Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump for 2 decades and understands him better than most journalists. Based on exclusive interviews with President Trump and his aides and crammed with media-grabbing revelations, the book, The Trump White House, answers the question, who is Donald Trump? And my first question is, Donald Trump leads a very unconventional presidency, and there's been plenty of books written about him. What is the major takeaway you want readers of your book to have?
You know, plenty of books written about him and about his presidency, but I think this is the only positive book. And at the same time, it's truthful. It does go into his quirks and comments that I think every supporter cringes at sometimes. But at the same time, it concludes that he's going to be seen as one of the greatest American presidents. If you look at any of those achievements that you mentioned and others in the foreign affairs arena, getting rid of ISIS, now meeting with key foreign leaders, getting them to go along with American policies, it's just remarkable. But at the same time, you know, people can't understand this very perplexing personality, and I try to explain that in the book.
You do a great job, too. And so when did you personally interview Donald Trump for your book?
I interviewed Donald at Mar-a-Lago the night before New Year's Eve. We went to the New Year's Eve party, as we have been doing for 2 decades.
Was this like the past year? Okay.
Past year. And this is actually at 10:30 at night after dinner. Melania sort of supported the idea.
Why do you think Donald Trump is moving steadily up in the polls given his negative press coverage?
Well, despite the negative press coverage and dishonest media, which is just unprecedented. I was the Washington Post way back during Watergate. I was the Wall Street Journal. I can tell you we would have been fired immediately for many of these stories that appear where they put at the end of the story the fact that would totally undercut the lead. So what I try to do is really tell an honest story, a truthful story, and I think people will appreciate that.
I think they will. And you wrote that President Trump asked his aides if they thought his tweet claiming he had been wiretapped by President Obama was a good idea, but that claim was untrue. I mean, what did Trump's aides say about that presidential tweet?
You know, it's remarkable that despite his tirades at times and the unstable nature of his White House, they actually are candid with him. And you can tell how he brings out candor in people, the way he makes these, you know, comments, these asides when he's meeting with the Chinese leader, for example. So they actually will say, yeah, we don't think that was a good idea. But at the same time, what it does is, even though it does undermine his credibility, it empowers him and makes him the center of attention every single day, and that gives him power. People want to meet with him. Foreign leaders want to kowtow to him or are afraid of him.
So you think he's very dynamic in your view?
Dynamic, and it's all part of a strategy. I mean, it seems that sometimes he's just out of control, a loose cannon, but it actually worked.
Now, I had to laugh when I read your chapter, Darkness is Good, especially when I read that former Republican campaign aide and White House advisor Reince Priebus said, this is as bad as I've ever seen, when he read a transcript that the Washington Post was about to publish Trump's comments in 2005 to Billy Bush, an anchor on NBC's Access Hollywood. I mean, can you describe the Republican leadership's calls to Trump to drop out of the presidential race and Trump's reaction to that?
Yeah. Well, Reince Priebus, who was then the RNC chairman and helping Trump, said, I'm getting these calls from all the top people, and they're saying, you better drop out, and he basically agreed with that. They didn't know what they were going to do next if he did drop out. But Trump held that against him all the way through, even though he made him chief of staff. Reince really stuck with him, and really was responsible for a lot of the achievements, the deregulation that occurred in the beginning of the presidency, which in turn has encouraged companies to expand and hire more workers, and in turn that helps the stock market.
Well, one thing about Trump, he does talk to industry leaders a lot, doesn't he? He talks to a lot of people every day, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's incredible. When he makes a decision, people think it's impulsive and he doesn't really read anything. Well, he actually is very thorough in terms of getting opinions. Not always, but most of the time. He will consult with his own advisors, but he'll also ask just working class people, Secret Service people, chambermaids, what do they think? And he'll also call some of his friends, most of them billionaires. I list them in the book. There are about 12 of them.
Oh, yes, that's right. And it's incredible. He does talk to a lot of people. And then, of course, your book has a fascinating history about former White House staffer Steve Bannon. You wrote that Bannon was greatly affected by the rescue of the 52 American embassy hostages held in Iran during the President Carter's administration. How did this rescue change Bannon's views of Washington?
Well, Bannon saw that our presidents, in this case Carter, are weak and allow the U.S. to be trod on, and that was an example where lives are lost because there was not good planning, and so he, just like Trump, decided we're not going to be pushed around anymore, and a lot of times it's just a matter of proclaiming that, and companies fall in line, or countries fall in line.
Countries fall in line.
Both companies and
countries.
Countries, yeah.
And then also you wrote that Steve Bannon was the person who introduced Trump to the idea that he was similar to President Andrew Jackson, a populist who championed the common man. Well, can you briefly tell us Jackson's legacy on American politics?
Jackson, just like Trump, was very unconventional. He didn't hesitate to take on the establishment. He was a populist, and he empowered the American presidency. He made it a central focus of power, and that, of course, was helpful to the country.
Yes, yes. And then you wrote in your book that technically a leak is accurate information given to reporters without authorization. Well, you wrote that presidential aide Kellyanne Conway was the #1 leaker in the White House. Well, can you give us a couple of examples of what she leaked?
This is an example of the book being truthful. It's not a puff piece. On the one hand, it says Trump will be seen as one of the greatest presidents, just like Reagan, who was also reviled by the press.
Yes.
And yet he got rid of the Soviet Union, he boosted the economy.
Now everyone looks at him as a real hero, don't they?
They do. The Gallup polls show that he actually is seen as one of the greatest presidents. I reveal in the book that Kellyanne is a #1 leaker, and as an example, when I interviewed her at the White House, she apparently forgot that she was on the record, and she started lambasting Reince Priebus, saying things that were obviously untrue, and also said that Jared and Ivanka are leakers. In addition, she will leak material to reporters. Aides have told me that they've seen text messages that she has sent to reporters in which she actually leaks information. On the other hand, as I say in the book, she's a brilliant
She's very talented, yes.
Very talented, does a wonderful job of explaining his policies.
Yes, that's right. And there's a question pertaining to the news today. I mean, President Trump has said the Justice Department embedded a spy in his campaign for political purposes. However, House Speaker Paul Ryan disagrees that the Justice Department did that. I mean, what happens next on that claim, you think?
I think that the Inspector General's report is going to show that nothing happened. This was just standard procedure in any criminal investigation. You introduce or you interview people who may be able to give you information or elicit more information from the target. It's not that Trump actually was the target, but that's the way you get information. A spy is quite different. A spy is someone who, let's say, goes from our country to Russia and gathers classified information against their laws. the same in the other direction. In other words, it's improper or illegal. This was perfectly
not. Yeah, this was legal.
legal,
Okay.
and it's a way to find out, well, was there collusion or wasn't
Well, talking
there?
about Russia, do you think that President Trump will agree to an interview with Special Counselor Robert Mueller on the Russian collusion issue?
I think Trump will agree to an interview. You know, he loves to talk. And he actually, when I interviewed him at Mar-a-Lago, he asked me, what do you think of Mueller? Because I've written 3 books on the FBI, one of which led to the dismissal of William Sessions as FBI director. And Trump has known me for 2 decades, as you know, along with Melania. And I said, he's a man of integrity. He turned around the FBI to make it more prevention-oriented. That's why we've not had a successful foreign terrorist attack by a foreign terrorist network since 9/11.
So Mueller did a great job at the FBI, didn't he?
Yeah, fantastic, and Trump seemed to appreciate that. So I do think he will do an interview.
Huh, very interesting. Now, do you agree with Newt Gingrich, the former House Speaker, who wrote that the Clintons have been breaking the law and getting away with it since Hillary Clinton made nearly $100,000 from a $1,000 investment in cattle futures back in 1978? Is that claim true? Did that happen?
Well, that was the Whitewater issue was certainly thoroughly investigated by the special counsel or special prosecutor Ken Starr, and they never found enough to prosecute. You know, a lot of times, totally wrong behavior and improper behavior doesn't rise to the level of an actual violation of our existing criminal laws, and that's what people have come up against when going after Hillary. But going back to Norma Forder, his top aide, she said, that on the other hand, there's the real Donald that only insiders know, who's just the opposite of what you see on TV. There's no bravado. He's thoughtful. He listens. As an example, you remember during the campaign, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce called for a boycott of Trump's properties. But then a few months later, the head of the chamber met with Trump at Trump Tower. He emerged and he told CNN, my God, he's a totally different person. He listened, he was respectful. That's the difference between what Trump does on TV to get attention and empower him versus what he is really like, which is led to his
and that's in your
empire.
book. I mean, I remember reading about her in your book. That's fascinating. And then you wrote in chapter 8 of your book that President Bill Clinton spoke about the need to limit illegal immigration, but when Trump says the same thing, he is slammed by the journalist. I mean, can you care to comment on that?
Well, I have a chapter titled Scam Artists, and it means that these journalists are just like bank robbers. Even though it's not illegal, it's dishonest. And that's an example where whenever they keep hammering on Trump for calling for a wall, they never mention that Hillary and Biden and Obama all voted for the wall when they were in Congress. One of the most,
that's really interesting information.
yeah. One wonderful example of their dishonesty is the New York Times ran a story above the fold during the campaign, which began with the lead, this model, Rowan Brewer Lane, had barely met Donald Trump when he asked if she wanted to change out of her clothes. Well, wow, that's a great story, right? And the headline was Crossing the Line with Women, Trump. But in fact, what happened was she had been invited at the last minute to this pool party at Mar-a-Lago. She didn't have time to go back and get a bathing suit. Donald took a liking to her, showed her around the estate, said, do you want a bathing suit? She said, sure.
And take a pic, that's right.
She went in the bathroom and changed. And guess what? She started dating him for several months after that. And where did that appear in the story? In the 16th paragraph. If that had been in the lead, they could not have run the story. That is how dishonest and fraudulent the media have become.
Yes, you're right about that. And you wrote that Melania Trump wants her husband to tweet less to his 40 million followers. Do you think his tweeting is politically helpful or hurtful?
Oh, on the one hand, it will frequently undermine his credibility, and people wonder, is this guy off his rocker? But then at the same time, as I mentioned, he holds people's attention every single day, and that empowers him. And so not only are his policies working to deregulate, to get NATO to contribute more, but at the same time, there's this psychological impact where he'll say, you know, companies shouldn't be shipping jobs to Mexico, and sure enough, a lot of companies just think twice about doing that.
Because you know, he'll be tweeting about it if they do something, right?
And the same with the stock market. But instead of demonizing business, as Obama did, he is a champion of business, and that in turn empowers companies, allows them to expand, and has an impact on the stock market.
Absolutely. Now, can you explain why Trump has not been able to implement the Muslim ban to keep certain people from certain countries from entering the United States? That was in your book.
Yeah, well, you know, the law could not be more clear. It says that the president can limit, immigration, period, and for national security reasons, and that's what he's done. And yet, some judges have ruled against that. I think, you know, they're simply stepping up the vetting process. But the idea was that some of these countries simply don't have a reliable infrastructure that will allow the U.S. to vet these people before they come here.
So your feeling is that he might revisit that at some point, or you think he's going to just...
Well, yeah, and I think they're using other methods, other procedures, and they are
trying to
limiting possible threats.
Yes. Now, it was very interesting to read about the wealth and privileges in Palm Beach and Trump's purchase of Mar-a-Lago. How do residents of Palm Beach, Florida, feel about Trump?
Well, they don't know what to make of him, especially when he runs around with his Lamborghini and he doesn't wear the traditional blue blazer. He'll wear a suit. Oh, they don't like that. He'll wear a tie. No, that's against the uniform in Palm Beach. When my wife Pam and I, she's also a former Washington Post reporter, first flew down with him to Mar-a-Lago 2 decades ago for a book I was doing on Palm Beach. Trump imitated the nasal constricted tones of the blue bloods.
How's that sound?
The old guard. I can't imitate it. But he's very good at that. Condemning his club Mar-a-Lago because it admits blacks and Jews. And to this day, some clubs in Palm Beach do not admit blacks and Jews.
Wow.
And initially, the town fathers, the town council in Palm Beach, refused to allow Trump to turn this estate into a club, and he believed it was because they're bigots. Some of those town council members belong to those very same clubs that will not admit blacks and Jews. So what did he do? And this is sort of an example of how he operates and makes deals. He had his Palm Beach or Florida lawyer, Paul Rempel, who's Jewish, send copies of gentleman's agreement and guess who's coming to dinner to those town council members, implying that they're bigots. Trump also sued the town for $50 million, but at the same time, he invited those town council members to play tennis with him, golf with him, parties at Mar-a-Lago with gorgeous young women, Trump would say, and of course they did approve the club. So that's how he operates, and people just can't understand that he does it over and over again, but he succeeds.
Well, what's amazing, like you wrote that you went to the recent New Year's Eve party, 700 guests paid $1,200 per person to attend his party at Mar-a-Lago, and you and your wife sat at the head table with Melania and Donald Trump. I mean, can you describe the crowd and your meal? Was it?
You would think that he would invite, the top celebrities in the world, which he could do, and they would all come. But no, he actually invites people whom he considers real long-term friends, very few of whom you've ever heard of. And we were...
Like friends from New York and Washington, right?
Right,
okay.
Yeah, and we were among those friends. And that's one way that we've gotten to know Trump and Melania. We spent a lot of time with them. When you actually see them together, you realize that this is a really solid marriage. They're they engage in these very intense discussions. They laugh and they tease with each other. So I'm quite sure this marriage will last. And I quote people like Reince Priebus and others as saying that she has this tremendous political savvy, and she will sit in on meetings. I'm going
to have a question about that coming up, because but I want to ask you also, there was a great chapter in your book about Anthony Scaramucci, and what he brought in, and why did he leave, you think?
Well, he just turned out to be,
Inept, right?
a loose cannon, and inept, and simply, made enemies for Trump, and engaged in this vituperative language. He was someone who had been brought in by Ivanka and Jared, and Ivanka and Jared also pushed Trump to fire Comey, which has to be one of the worst decisions ever, because even though whatever you may think of Comey, and certainly he's turned out to be a real travesty based on what he's done with his book, and he did leak classified information, still that led to the appointment of Mueller. And Trump has said, maybe I made a mistake there privately, because ever since there's been what Trump would call the witch hunt.
The witch hunt, yeah. And you wrote that Trump's Secret Service director proposed withdrawing protection from some Trump family members and aides to save money, and horrified White House staffers shot down that idea. Yeah. Can you tell us more?
It's just shocking that anybody in law enforcement or in the Secret Service would ever contemplate, in their wildest nightmares, withdrawing protection from Trump family members to save money.
Yes.
Unbelievable. And I've written 2 books on the Secret Service. I revealed the prostitution scandal in Cartagena. So I'm very clued into how the Secret Service has become lax to begin with. And now this guy, who was appointed by Trump, is proposing withdrawing protection. Can you imagine what would happen if ISIS took Ivanka hostage?
Exactly. It would be horrible. It would be horrible. Now, I found it interesting to read how Trump worked to get his $1.5 trillion tax cut for individuals and businesses through the House and the Senate. But the media was not too positive about this tax cut. Why?
I think they picked up a lot of the Democrat talking points. Nancy Pelosi said that the bonuses that companies were giving as a result were crumbs, and in fact has said she wants to raise taxes. Well, that really shows the difference between Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
Republicans say put more money in people's pockets. They can decide how to spend. The government wastes money, is not actually producing anything, and that's a good example of the difference.
And then you wrote that Trump does not drink alcohol, and Melania sometimes has a glass of red wine at dinner, but Trump drinks Diet Coke or virgin pina coladas. So what does he like to eat?
Well, he likes well-done steak, unfortunately. Mar-a-Lago has some of the best steaks, but he wants them well done.
Well done, okay.
And he likes meatloaf, which is his mother's recipe, and so that's always on the menu at Mar-a-Lago.
Okay. As
well as Barron's macaroni and cheese. That's what it's called, Barron's macaroni and cheese on the menu. And Barron, by the way, is very respectful of Secret Service agents, unlike Jenna and Barbara Bush, who would actually try to lose their detail. They just didn't understand the need for protection. Or Hillary Clinton, who is so disdainful of Secret Service agents that being assigned to her detail is considered a form of punishment within the Secret Service. I asked Trump, how do you like being protected by the Secret Service? We were at Mar-a-Lago overlooking one of the 2 pools. They're always heated to 78 degrees. And he said, I love it. I'll be golfing and there'll be 20 agents all around me and they're all looking in different directions so they don't see if I miss a ball.
That's pretty funny. You wrote that Trump sometimes functions as his own chief of staff. You wrote that he does not like to feel overmanaged. But let me just ask, what problems did he have with his former Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, you think?
Even though, on the one hand, Trump would humiliate him many times, at the same time, Tillerson would also sort of roll his eyes whenever Trump said, you should do something. So it was a very, very unfortunate relationship.
So, but now you think it's much smoother with the current situation?
Yeah, I think Trump has learned that he needs someone
that he could totally trust.
Compatible with.
Compatible, yeah. Now, you wrote that Trump uses his golf courses to help forge personal relationships and woo those he needs on his side. Can you give us some examples of that?
It's basic human nature that if you invite someone to a party or to play golf, you're going to have a much greater chance of forging a good deal, and that's what he does. Whether it's inviting people like the Japanese leader to play
Exactly.
golf.
He had a really good session with him, didn't
Right. He's very close to him now, and or inviting them to New Year's Eve party at Mar-a-Lago, or inviting someone to go on Air Force One, whereas or to the White House. Whereas Obama hardly ever invited anybody. You know, he just was into his own
World there.
World, yeah, and even Democrats said that they've never been invited to the White House.
Now, you also, I was very surprised to read in your book that Marla Maples, Trump's second wife, slept with her bodyguard in Palm Beach. Trump fired the bodyguard, who then admitted to the affair. I don't think this is widely known.
Not widely known, as you say, Trump did fire him, but he took a while. He took 4 months to fire him. That's sort of typical. He'll sort of contemplate actions like that for a while. But Marla did propose the Trump spa at Mar-a-Lago, and he built a Trump spa. That was one of her solid contributions. But she never liked the idea of turning the estate into a club. She wanted it just for herself.
I see.
Of course, she produced a wonderful daughter, Tiffany.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And they're all a very close family.
Yes, yes, yes. And then you wrote that First Lady Melania Trump has tremendous impact on policy and strategy, and she sits in on meetings and is widely admired by aides for her judgment. And where do you think she hopes? Where do you think she hopes to make a difference?
She wants Trump to succeed. Number one, she wants the country to succeed, but she will also weigh in with criticism. Don't tweet so much. She will hand him articles that are both pro and con that she thinks he should read. And this has never come out before, that she's a very powerful influence. No First Lady has sat in on meetings in the past. Of course, they share their views with their husbands, but to actually sit in on meetings as a powerful aide, that's unprecedented.
It
and
is.
It's been kept secret. And this is one thing that Trump doesn't necessarily want people to know. He doesn't want people to know the softer side of him. For example, that he will hand out $100 bills to janitors moving furniture. I asked him when I interviewed him, why don't you let people know about that and know about your softer side? And he became sort of defensive. Well, where did you hear that? What janitors? and he finally admitted that, yeah, that is true.
He's a softie, but people don't know that, right? This has been such a fantastic discussion, and I would like for you to tell us, where can our viewers in Arlington find your book?
The book is available at all book outlets, either online or bookstores, or it can be ordered from my website, ronaldkessler.com.
That's fantastic. And thank you so much for being a guest on our program, Ronald. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
I love you being on your show. Thank you.
And thank you so much for watching. Please join us again next month for a new edition of the Bookman's Corner. I'm Lois Lindstrom.